With the candidates finalized, Taiwan's presidential race enters its final stretch.
同韩方和日方共同努力，推动三国合作重回正轨。
Tensions ease in the Pacific as China and its neighbors agree to talks. Taiwan struggles to get people off gas-powered vehicles and onto green transportation. Plus, artists from across Asia unite for a special performance in southern Taiwan. Hello and good evening. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. I'm Eric Gao. Taiwan's presidential campaign is in the home stretch. With the three candidates all formally registered, it's now a race to the finish. And while the focus has so far been on personalities and party loyalties, the issues voters care about are now getting more attention. John Van Trieste has this update.
Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party is tackling the hardest bits first. The country's east coast is a stronghold for their rivals, the Kuomintang. But going into this election, the DPP has a secret weapon, and her name is Xiaoliuqiu. Back in 2016, she won a legislative seat in Hualien County, the first from the DPP to ever pull that off. Now she's back, running for vice president. And the welcome shows that around these parts, she's still got it. The party hopes her popularity will translate to votes for her running mate, Lai Ching-te, and give it control of the presidency for 4 more years. Lai's even gone solo in the East, venturing beyond Xiao's former district to campaign. His message is that with him in charge, education in this rural part of Taiwan will no longer be left behind. Taiwan's opposition, split into 2 camps, is bouncing back after coalition talks collapsed on Friday. Though rivals, both are saving the brunt of their criticism for the DPP, their common enemy. The Kuomintang's Xiaoliuqiu hit the DPP where he thinks it will hurt, their approach to China. China claims Taiwan as its territory, and ties between the countries have become deeply strained during the China-wary DPP's control of the presidency.
民进党如果再说他的两岸政策，说了半天，大概只有赖清德讲的珍珠奶茶。
Meanwhile, Taiwan People's Party candidate Ko Wen-je is courting the youth vote. He wants to be the first third-party candidate in history to win Taiwan's presidency, and he sees relatively new voters as key to getting there.
我们在50岁以上的支持度很低，我们需要把每一个年轻人，他都变成一个家庭里面的思想的传播者，透过他们去影响他们的长辈。
There's not much time left to change minds, though. The election is January 13th, less than 50 days away. With Friday's candidate registration over, it's now a scramble to the finish. Delphine Chen and John Van Trieste for TaiwanPlus.
For more on Taiwan's presidential race, our reporter Stash Butler spoke to political scientist Chen Fangyu.
The third-party candidate, the Taiwan People's Party, Ko Wen-je, has been trailing in the polls ever since the spectacular collapse of an opposition coalition deal between him and the KMT last week. Do you see his challenge for the presidency fading?
Not necessarily. However, it hurts because in the past, Ko Wen-je emphasized that both big parties, including DPP and KMT, are not trustworthy. However, he turned out to be cooperating with KMT. So it kind of fractured his own promise to his supporters. However, I still think, it's possible for him to remobilize these voters because there's a strong sense that people do not trust the main parties, including DPP and KMT. So for Ko Wen-je, I think he's still able to remobilize these kind of supporters.
The KMT's candidate, Xiaoliuqiu, has chosen a vice presidential candidate who's known for his quite strong pro-unification views when it comes to China, whereas Lai Ching-te, the current vice president and DPP candidate, has picked Taiwan's former envoy to the US. What do you make of the two biggest parties choosing such different approaches to Taiwan's international affairs?
Actually, I argued this several months ago that the opposition party and the DPP are choosing two totally different paths for Taiwan's international participation. So for DPP, the ruling parties, it's very clear that they will continue to ally with the US, Japan, Korea, and for example, the Philippines. However, the opposition party, they also choose a very clear pathway for Taiwan. That is to go to the international politics through Beijing. They have very clear opposition alternative for the voters. So I think that is good because people can have a very clear choice.
Now that the opposition drama of last week is all done, what do you see being the main kind of points of contention driving the rest of this election campaign?
The opposition parties will try to continue the resentment on the ruling parties because in the past 7 or 8 years, there's indeed a lot of dissatisfaction toward the ruling party. Between Ke Wen-je and KMT, they will start to fight against each other because it's very clear that they have to split the opposition and campaign, so they have to fight and they have to attack each other in order to maximize the vote. So that will be very interesting. I mean, after this registration.
Now, it's Chen Fangyu of Suzhou University speaking to our reporter Stash Butler. Taiwan health authorities are on alert amid rising cases of mycoplasma pneumonia in China. The Centers for Disease Control here has ramped up notices at airports, advising passengers from China, Hong Kong, and Macau who have symptoms to seek medical attention. It's also reminding people to get vaccinated, wash their hands, and wear a mask during travel. China is experiencing outbreaks of several respiratory illnesses. Officials there have also reported increases in influenza and COVID-19, with some patients contracting more than one virus at the same time. Taiwan's CDC says children are the most at-risk group for these illnesses. In international news, foreign ministers from China, Japan, and South Korea have agreed to a summit between the leaders of their countries. Here's what China's Wang Yi said.
作为一衣带水的近邻，中方将继续本着以邻为善、以邻为伴的方针，同韩方和日方共同努力，推动三国合作重回正轨，保持健康稳定、可持续的发展，为地区乃至世界的和平与繁荣做出我们新的贡献。
Foreign ministers also vowed to work together in areas such as security and technology during their meeting in the Korean city of Busan. It's the first time the three countries' foreign ministers have gotten together since 2019. The talks are the latest sign of easing tensions in the region, following the meeting between Chinese leader Xi Jinping and U.S. President Joe Biden in San Francisco earlier this month. To find out more about why China and its neighbors are now looking to cooperate, our reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to Xiaoliuqiu, professor of diplomacy at National Zhenzi University.
What is China looking to gain from cooperating with both South Korea and Japan?
Of course, from the Chinese perspective, it's always relevant to the United States because China and the United States are competing for the regional leadership as well as global leadership. So in that case, from Chinese perspective, China would like to enhance its relationship with both South Korea and Japan, given Camp David trilateral summit in the States previously. So China wants to get it balanced, obviously. I think South Korea is very eager to get the trilateral summit to be held in Korea as soon as possible, as they have already mentioned about hopefully it's going to be held in early next year. You know, Korea is going to have a local election April next year. So it's very important for the ruling party to show they have better relationship with China.
And how open is South Korea and Japan to working with Beijing?
So that's something Korea's number one priority is actually Sino-Korea summit, followed by the Korea-China-Japan summit. So that is why Korea is eager to have this summit. Of course, Korea is under pressure from North Korea. That's another big thing. South Korea needs China's good offices. So that is why Korea is eager. For Japan, Kishida just had the summit with Xi Jinping in San Francisco. So for Japan, both sides just mentioned about state again their stances. Nothing very convergent in terms of interest, even though they talk about mutually beneficial strategic partnership, but in reality, China is not going to lift the ban on Japan's seafood at this moment, unless Japan accepts China's request to allow the Chinese specialists to test on the spot.
China's foreign minister at this recent meeting said that China is committed to keeping peace and prosperity in the region. But at the same time, we're seeing kind of provocative actions in the South China Sea with its vessels harassing Philippine ships and other ships in the area. What do you think China is willing to sacrifice on that end in order to cooperate more with its Asian neighbors?
From Chinese perspective, of course, Northeast Asia is more important than Southeast Asia. So that is why Wang Yi emphasized that China pays special attention to the rising tension on the Korean Peninsula. So that means China actually does not like what happened now, because both Korea have already greatly enhanced their military capabilities, plus spy satellite launching competition. Not good for China. So that is why that's China's major concern. China wants South Korea to do something to alleviate this tension first, rather than just us come here to summit and that's nothing positive from Chinese perspective. Chinese wants to see something positive first.
That was Xiaoliuqiu, a professor of diplomacy at National Zhengzhou University, speaking to our reporter Jaime Okan. Now, North Korea is deploying heavy weapons and soldiers at some of its outposts on the border near South Korea. Security footage overlooking the demilitarized zone between the two countries shows North Korean soldiers rearming and repairing old border posts. This comes after South Korea suspended a military pact with the North following Pyongyang's launch of a spy satellite last week. North Korea says this breakdown of the agreement means it can deploy weapons on the border. The United Nations marks Sustainable Transport Day at the end of November every year. Taiwan already has a comprehensive transportation system, but as Laurel Seward explains, the country's green transition has been slowed down because most people still prefer to drive their own vehicles.
From getting to school and going to work, to buying groceries or doing business, transportation is an essential part of everyday life. The UN says sustainable transport needs to be easily accessible, safe, and have minimal environmental impact. In theory, Taiwan's public transport ticks all the boxes. There's an abundance of metro, bus, and shared biking options for people to get around cities, while trains and roads connect the whole country. But Taiwan is also known for heavy congestion, seas of scooters, and traffic accidents. Something analysts say is because it's cheaper and more convenient to drive your own vehicle.
Currently, the cost or the overall cost they need to pay for using a private vehicle is low. I think it's relatively low. I mean, another way is that we need to try to really reduce the attractiveness of using individual vehicles.
One way the government is trying to encourage more people to take public transportation is by improving its shared public bike system like this one. They'll be adding electric bikes to the system to make it cheaper and more efficient to get from A to B.
The push to go electric is part of Taiwan's goal for net zero carbon emissions by 2050. In 2021, transportation accounted for about 13% of all carbon emissions in Taiwan. It's a sizable portion when compared to other industries, so greening the sector has become a priority. The government plans to electrify all buses by 2030, and there are more electric scooter sharing options popping up.
The biggest change I've seen is in terms of electric scooters, and I do see a lot more parking with charging stations, but I don't think that's what's going to make the difference for sustainability. I think there needs to be bigger steps.
One option is the introduction of car-free cities, or areas that only allow cyclists, pedestrians and public transportation. It's a model European cities like Oslo, Barcelona and Zurich use to prioritise pedestrian safety, public space and air quality. But this seems like a long way away. Disputes over land rights mean drastic changes to urban spaces face huge barriers. But it's changing people's travel habits that may prove to be the hardest task of all. Chris Ma and Laurel Stewart for TaiwanPlus.
Coming up, 17 hostages walk free as Hamas and Israel's truce enters its final day.
For more stories from Taiwan and around the world, download the TaiwanPlus app.
In the face of adversity, the power of truce.
A roadmap for a just and open world, charted by the freest country in Asia.
Taipei for TaiwanPlus.
TaiwanPlus News, a voice of freedom in Asia.
Welcome back. You're watching TaiwanPlus News. Hamas has freed another 17 hostages held in Gaza as part of a deal to temporarily pause fighting with Israel. In exchange, Israel released a third group of Palestinian women and children, and both sides are looking to extend the truce. Joyce Tseng has the latest.
A mother and son reunited near the occupied West Bank city of Hebron in the Middle East. Khalil Zamareh has just been freed from an Israeli prison as part of a third batch of hostages in a prisoner swap deal between Israel and Palestinian militant group Hamas.
الاحتلال لا بفرق بين كبير ولا صغير، بفرقش ولا بين حدا، يعني كيف كانوا عملونا بعملوا الكبار والصغار، ما فيش عندهم حدا معين أو شيء.
Israel and Hamas are reaching the end of a 4-day truce to release hostages and make way for humanitarian aid, the longest break in fighting in Gaza since Hamas launched an attack on Israel on October 7th. The Israeli response to that attack, with airstrikes and a mounting ground offensive, has killed over 14,000 Palestinians and displaced hundreds of thousands more. The hostage deal brokered by Qatar, the U.S., and Egypt has already seen the release of dozens of captured Israelis, Palestinians, and foreign nationals, including 17 people from Thailand, the Southeast Asian nation with the most captives taken by Hamas of any foreign country. Many of those freed are now receiving medical care.
The physical condition of the children and the mothers that came to us is now stable. They are undergoing a medical and emotional evaluation by the medical and psychosocial team.
Meanwhile, public calls for an end to fighting are getting louder worldwide as governments are divided in their reactions to the Israel-Hamas war. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said he intends to resume Israel's campaign to eliminate Hamas once the temporary truce ends. But he's also welcomed extending the pause if additional hostages are released. For some of the families torn apart by this war, an emotional, long-awaited reunion. But for many others, the daunting, heavy anticipation stretches on as they pray their loved ones will soon make it home too. Scott Huang and Joyce Tsin for TaiwanPlus.
Over 100 people have been arrested in Australia during a protest at the world's biggest coal port.
Thousands are gathered here today, both from Newcastle and all across Australia, young, old, from all walks of life, to send a clear message to our government that coal is fueling the climate crisis.
Hundreds of activists took to the waters around Newcastle and New South Wales over the weekend to protest climate inaction. Protesters say they want the government to cancel new fossil fuel projects. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese promised to cut emissions when taking office last year, but has since greenlit 4 new coal mines. A new right-of-centre government has taken office in New Zealand. National Party leader Christopher Luxon was sworn in as Prime Minister on Monday. His party agreed to a coalition with 2 other parties, ending 6 years of left-wing governments in the country. As part of the deal, they plan to roll back the use of the indigenous Maori language, make changes to the central bank's mandate, and end a ban on oil and gas exploration. Back in Taiwan, the southern city of Kaohsiung is one of Taiwan's biggest cultural centers. That's why a group promoting artists from across Asia has chosen it as the host for their first get-together in 4 years. Yu Jinghua has more.
A Voice for the Powerless. The musical Tropical Angels depicts the lives of people living through conflict in Southeast Asia. The play is one of 8 performances featured at this year's gathering of the Federation for Asian Cultural Promotion, an organization dedicated to developing the region's performing arts scene. The group's 2023 conference is being held in Taiwan's southern port city of Kaohsiung, and it's the first in-person edition since the COVID-19 pandemic.
We have more than 80 delegates from Asia and also Europe to join us. And after the pandemic, we actually changed a lot, but we're also happy to see each other. And we're looking forward for more collaborations and also more artistic creatorship in the coming future.
A diverse set of performers are here to celebrate their roots and culture. 11-year-old Filipino harpist Vian Ignacio shares her country's history by playing music composed by Julio Nakbil, a revolutionary who took part in the Philippines' 1896 uprising against Spanish rule. And dancers from Hong Kong are showcasing their work inspired by a funeral service. Choreographer Terry Zhang says it reflects a chaotic few years for Hong Kongers.
因为最近香港从2019年，然后到疫情，香港我们发生了很多事情，然后我在想，好像我们的里面的人好像没有一个方式去 release 我们的情绪，然后我觉得这个是一个很好的机会，给我就是用破地狱的元素，用葬礼这个元素来给香港一些人做一个治疗。
Meanwhile, a contribution from Taiwan focuses on the stresses of life in modern society. This musical work is created using sounds and images collected from trees around Kaohsiung.
觉得这个树这个本身呢，它其实就是一个非常非常中性的一个东西，一个大家的生命都有共同的对于树的不同的记忆，它最容易能够连接彼此。 就抹去掉彼此之间产生的，不管是压力也好，或是一些斗争，或是一些比较负面的情绪也好。
In a world facing renewed challenges, art remains a potent force for bringing people together. And events like this remind audiences that humans have more in common than what sets us apart. Kamashi and Yu Jinghua for TaiwanPlus.
For the first time ever, the world's biggest freediving festival was held at Xiaoliuqiu, an island off the southeast coast of Taiwan. Our reporter Sandy Chi was there.
Swimsuits, masks and flippers on, ready to plunge into the ocean. These are freedivers from all around the world here in Xiaoliuqiu, a small island off the coast of the southern city of Kaohsiung. They've all gathered here for one purpose, to attend the world's biggest freediving festival, Deep Week. It's been held before in countries like the Philippines, Thailand and Mexico. This is the first time Deep Week is taking place in Taiwan, with organizers saying it's an ideal spot to hold the event.
Taiwan is probably the easiest location that we have, or one of the easiest locations that we have, and it's because the conditions are so easy.
Water temperature, the stability of the currents, like it's not choppy like Australia is, and the visibility is amazing. It's just like it's crystal clear. Like I'm looking down and I can see someone like 20, 25 meters below me, and it's just like you just can't see that in most other places.
When Deep Week first started a few years ago, there were only around 35 participants, but that number has grown to over 100 in recent years. This time, around 130 participants traveled to Xiaoliuqiu to meet and learn from some freediving record holders, including the world's greatest living freediver, Alexei Molchanov.
Freediving is a sport which I love to share with people. I love to talk about philosophy of freediving, and for me it's, I would say, is one of the best tools to learn how to get calmer, how to get less stressed and less tense.
Other than attending workshops and training sessions, participants get a chance to witness Molchanov in action.
So first, Alexei, seeing his exceptional athleticism, he flew through the Ninja Warrior course, which is like an obstacle course underwater, and that was amazing.
Together for 7 days, these divers spend time together in the water and on land. For first-timers, this experience opens their eyes to a whole new world.
I'm also athlete or freediver, and so I had a lot of questions about like how to do equalization and how to push myself to be more better and to push myself and break my personal best.
I've pushed so many PBs. Every day I've actually managed to improve my PB here, going from 20 meters without fins down to 30 meters free immersion yesterday.
It's not just newbies here. Some participants have been to several deep weeks.
This is my 4th deep week now. Each time, the best thing is making friends from all around the world, seeing old friends, new friends, and it keeps the community closer together.
That bond is what motivates these divers to travel around the world and freedive in different countries. Today, Taiwan is home to more than 90,000 registered freedivers and has the 2nd largest number of freediving licenses in the world. With Deep Week being held in Xiaoliuqiu, it's an inspiring opportunity for Taiwan's athletes to learn from the best and dive deeper into the freediving world. Scott Huang and Sandy Chi for TaiwanPlus.
Thanks for joining us this evening on Taiwan Plus News. I'm Eric Gao. Take care, and we'll see you later.